George, and then we should be good to go. All right, I will go ahead and call the meeting to order. Thank you. And we'll start with a roll call. McKee here, Schultz
here,
Bodema
present,
Behrenkamp
here,
Nichols
here.
Perfect. Everyone is here. If you'd like to stand and join us in the Pledge of Allegiance. Pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay. Agenda approval. Do we have anything from staff? Sounds like a few changes.
Yes, Mayor. So we moved the recognition of our canine unit up to item 5A. We have added the information from the minutes for both the work session on February 8th and the council meeting on February 8th for items 7A and 7B. We had 4 applicants come in for item 7F for planning commissioners, so that was updated. We have added minutes for item 7J from the March 9th meeting. An effective date was changed for the canine unit for item 7L. We are tabling item 7M, and we added some additional information to the lead service line inventory on 7O, and we added Public Works Facility Fund Closeout 7Q, and we removed item 8B. We're tabling that for a future meeting. Those are all the changes, Mayor.
Perfect. Anything from council?
Mr. Mayor. Yeah. Can we pull 7K, please?
Yes. When we get, just give me a minute. When we get to consent, we can go over anything we want to pull, including that. But that's one on my list as well.
Okay.
Okay. If there's nothing else in terms of changes, I will go ahead and entertain a motion to approve the agenda as amended.
So moved.
Second.
Michelle's pick. All right. Any discussion? No. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Perfect. Okay, commission representatives. We have Mark Lanterman from Planning and Judy Strahler from Parks and Trails. Perfect. Thank you all. And as Jay had mentioned, we kind of moved our agenda around a little bit. Instead of having presentations a little bit later in the meeting, we moved it up, and we are recognizing our former police canine, Zeke. And I have a resolution I'll read here, and then I do have a little gift for him. So, and that's Zeke. For those who don't know him, he's very, very sweet boy and did a lot of great work here for the city. Whereas the City Council of the City of Corcoran, Minnesota does hereby find as follows. Whereas the police canine officer Zeke served the City of Corcoran and surrounding areas from June 2018 to December 2023, and whereas Zeke's 193 deployments resulted in locating vulnerable individuals fleeing subjects in numerous drug crimes, and whereas Officer Zeke's actions have helped the City of Corcoran maintain its status as one of the safest cities in Minnesota, and whereas effective December 18th, 2023, Officer Zeke retired from service. Now therefore be it resolved by the City Council of the City of Corcoran acknowledges the outstanding work by Police Canine Officer Zeke in service to the Corcoran community and surrounding areas. And just wanted to recognize Zeke, and since he is retiring after a long career of serving the city, I got him a little gift that hopefully he enjoys. Nice retired beer. Go for it. Here you go, Zeke.
You don't get a speech from him, sorry. He didn't get trained that way. Thank you guys, every one of you. Appreciate you all very much.
And thank you for bringing Zeke back. Please bring him back anytime. Love to see him. And you.
Unless you're on the run or something.
Bring him back for events. Okay, now we will move on into public or open forum. And I just wanted to make one note on open forum because of the agenda change. If you were coming to speak on 8B, which was the second planning item today, the 610 extension business park project, that is now being removed from the agenda. So you're free to speak about it if you'd like at open forum. I would just note that it's been pulled by the applicant for the time being, and we don't know what the application will look like when it comes back. So you're free to come talk about it if you'd like, but we don't really know what we're looking at this point. So just to let you know, other than that, we'll go ahead and start with open forum. And Jay,
We have one card submitted for Miss Angie Bodema.
Perfect.
You know her?
I do know her.
Okay.
Okay.
She runs our house.
Name and address would be great.
Angie Bodema, 10500 Trail Haven Road. Mayor and Council, I have lived in Corcoran for 10.5 years, and over this time, I have observed that Hope Community Church has been a good neighbor and generous with the community. I noticed that they have opened the church for many community events, including blood drives, gun safety classes, Zumba classes, the Lions Scholarship Night, the JC's Santa Visit, and the Easter egg hunt that had to move from the park due to weather last year. I've also seen the staff serve at the Night to Unite event at Public Works. This tells me they are community-minded and they love the city and people of Corcoran. And it gives me the idea and peace of mind that they have put a lot of thought and consideration into this project and its impact on the community. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else for open forum? Double check my cards. I think everyone else is on the item itself. Perfect. Then we will move right along to consent agenda, which consists, it's changed a little bit, so hopefully I get this right. Currently consists of 7A through 7O. Would anyone like to pull anything? John, you had mentioned 7K.
Yes.
Okay.
I would like to also pull E, F, and G.
G, which is that. Anything else, Dean or Jeremy?
No.
Okay.
No.
Yeah, I think that got the ones I had as well. So, perfect. I will entertain a motion to approve consent agenda items A through D, H through J, and L through O.
So
I think it's
moved.
actually P there. The Public Works facility, I believe, is P.
Oh,
We only tabled one.
my bad.
Q.
I'm sorry, it's listed as Q. So it stayed, the numbers stayed aligned with the way they were, actually.
Gotcha. So, and it, with the
Well, we
additional.
apologize
We
for the
pulled
confusion.
M though, correct?
Right, but the others didn't. M didn't happen on there, but it's still, since it was published as the agenda, it was still left on the agenda for this evening. So
Okay, let me copy this down here then real quick.
apologize for the confusion.
No worries. G, K. That's all I have. So I'll remake that motion. I'll withdraw it and remake it. Make a motion to approve consent agenda items A through D, H through J, L, and N through Q.
Second.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Perfect. Alrighty, we'll start with E, which is appointing planning commissioners. Counselor Nichols and I were the subcommittee this time. We had several, I think 4. Yeah, I don't know why I would have just jump past that. Sorry about that. Let's start with E. That would make more sense. Who pulled E?
I did.
Go right ahead.
So just because we're past the 7-year depreciation life cycle on these chairs, I don't see anything wrong with them. I can't see voting for spending $4,000 on chairs up here when these perfectly work fine.
Okay. Any other thoughts on that?
I feel the same way, except for that side, if they get used and there's some sort of bodily function or issue with a normal chair life cycle for people that maybe are on the chairs longer than we are, once a week for a meeting. So like, I'm totally fine with our chairs, but if there's an issue with potential loss of work because of posture or,
Ergonomics.
yeah.
I had the same concern because we don't use them very much. But I brought that to staff, and staff came back and said these are actually used fairly often for city workers as well. They'll use this space for meetings. And so it's not just council or the commissions that use these, it's also employees of the city. So
Yeah,
on that rationale, I was okay with it.
These chairs up, these ones? Oh, okay.
I mean, I get your point. They get used. They don't get used that often. But I've sat in these chairs for now almost 10 years, and they fit my ass the same today as they did 10 years ago. So, and honestly, the chair I have at work is 20-something years old, and it works just fine too. So I'm going to vote to deny item 7E at this time, and if staff wants to bring back with some amendment based on need, I'm happy to entertain it then.
Okay. And then maybe that would be a route do you think it would be possible to get a price on just what we would need in terms of staff chairs? Okay. Then would you like to make a motion?
Yeah, I'll make a motion to deny as written right now.
Do we have a second?
Second.
All those in favor say aye.
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 Opposed? Aye or nay. 4-1, so that does not pass, but I think you raised some very good, or I'm sorry, that passes. The purchase does not pass, the resolution passes. I think you make some very good points. These chairs are pretty old, not the most comfortable, but I think council and commissions can probably tough it out a little longer. But if staff needs some, they're using it more often, I think you can make that work. So if you'd like to bring that back to a subsequent meeting with just maybe a smaller number of chairs, we can take a look at that.
Mr. Mayor,
Yes,
I have a fun story.
go for it.
The former president of Wells Fargo Bank, when they were trying to drive maximum efficiency, this is a story from good to great, he had the oldest chair in the company. And when people would come before him and ask for money, he would pick at it and pull insulation pieces out of the armrests, as if to make the point that if I can enjoy this chair, you don't need whatever it is you're asking.
There you go.
And I know the option too, I'd be supportive of the Herman Miller chairs. Those are the chairs we bought at work, and I remember the day they actually had us try them on because there's different sizes of those chairs. It was in 1999. I'm still using the same chair. Our whole company is using the same chairs that work just fine. So those are a good chair if you decide to go down that route.
When we looked at them, they were between $500 and $800 a piece, and that's
Yeah.
why staff didn't recommend them.
But they're going, I can tell you that now they're going 25 years at our office.
These ones have made it 30 years.
Yeah, these ones, yeah. They are getting up there. Okay, we'll move on to item 7F, which is the Planning Commission appointments. We had 2 vacancies and a number of applicants. Jeremy and I met or had phone calls with them, some right up to the wire here, just prior to the meeting. And really had 4 fantastic applicants. I don't think there's a way we can go wrong. But I think, kind of given the discussion Jeremy and I had, we would like to propose nominating Cecilia and I don't have the spelling of her last name in front of me. I apologize, Cecilia.
Kozicki, I believe.
What's that?
Kozicki.
Kozicki.
Kozicki. And Philip, who of course I also don't have his...
Peter Hargreaves was the second.
Yes, he was. I apologize. I'm all over the place right now. Peter. So Cecilia and Peter were the two that stood out to us the most as maybe the best fits right now, and we would like to nominate them to the rest of the council for consideration. We did speak with the other candidates, Chris, who would like us to keep his application on file for future consideration if anything opens up, and Georgia, who is interested in a number of commissions, including the watershed, and has a background that she's actually pretty familiar with the watershed process, so it might be something to look into when our long-serving watershed commissioner does move. Might be good to kind of get them in touch and see if it's a good fit, and we can maybe look at appointing her in that position later on in the year. If
She has water experience of some sort?
She has a legal background, and she has a number of friends who have served or are serving on watersheds in different states.
That's a serious appointment.
Yeah.
So we need, like, someone really good in that.
Yeah, she impressed me very much, and I think importantly has interest in doing it. That's, that is important. But that's something we could bring at a future meeting to kind of look at that, and we could probably even have her come in and talk to council, but might be a good opportunity and good timing on that one. So I'll make the motion to appoint Cecilia and Peter to the Planning Commission for a term ending, I believe it is, one moment.
February 28,
2027.
So I'll second it.
Okay.
And
Any
start
discussion?
the discussion. There are some people here new, so periodically from time to time, we have holes in the organization for commissions. So it's a good way to get involved, and sometimes we don't have applicants, sometimes we have 4 for 2. But if you're interested in being part of this, we're always interested in talent. We need it. It's very hard to make good decisions without input from a lot of people. So just keep that back in mind.
Absolutely. And again, all 4 seem great. Hard to go wrong. Right? It's good. Any other discussion? Okay. All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Okay. And to those candidates, or those new commissioners, Natalie, you'll be reaching out probably pretty soon, because next meeting is, we'll get a little bit of time, the 7th.
It's actually March 12th. We had to reschedule because we weren't sure we were going to have a quorum on the 7th.
Actually, you should now, but.
Yeah, well, yeah, but we
Good deal.
only had one person who could attend the last meeting, so we had to
Okay.
reschedule.
Yeah, and it probably wouldn't be best to have 2 brand new people and 1 person
Yeah.
at a meeting. Might be a little bit chaotic.
Yeah.
Just throw them right in.
It is also a giant salary, so if you really want to get involved.
You can draw a 0 as big as you want, it's still a 0.
Amazing number of zeros. If I can say one
please
more
do.
thing, we got a lot of people that in the past meeting, as far as new people to our organization and to this city and such, wanting to volunteer and those kind of things. I can't let an opportunity go by without plugging the Hamel Lions group. A lot of the JCs around here, they do so much for our city and such. The Lions are losing people and need a lot, and it's not a big
Are you
commitment.
talking about wait, you mean the Corcoran Lions?
Corcoran Lions, what did I say?
You said Hamel
The Hamel Lions, Corcoran Lions, they're the same.
That's a town down the
That'll
road.
get
We
me-
don't need to advertise for them.
That'll get me in trouble with them. Corcoran Lions, I'm sorry. There's so many opportunities, so many things that these groups do, so many good things. We make it to many, many of those events and stuff. Jump in, and look for opportunities with us too. We'd love to have everybody. Thank you,
Absolutely.
guys.
And there's also a lot of events, and it seems like more and more each year. If you're looking to volunteer, we will find a spot for you. It's a good problem to have between, Night Unite.
Night Unite,
and,
exactly.
Country days and all that different stuff. We'd love to have anyone who's interested volunteer, so just definitely reach out and we'll find a spot for you. And we appreciate it.
Isn't the rule they can't leave until they sign up for something, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Lock the doors.
Also, election judges.
Ah,
That's always
yeah.
really,
If you're interested in that,
big need.
Michelle is the person to reach out to on that. She's the election guru. And that's something that's ongoing pretty much throughout the rest of the year here now, so. Okay, the next one was, go right ahead, Alan.
So what I read the staff report about construction hours is the limitations on signs that we have, and I'm wondering if we should have a discussion about requiring signs as part of the building agreement and making the builders pay for those signs instead of cities paying for those.
Yeah.
At this time, we actually only deploy signs as needed. And I do want to point out that that seems to have been quite effective in 2023. We didn't have any significant complaints regarding construction hours. And so keeping a low inventory of signs, the original number that was put out there was actually considerably less than what we had talked about. It was less than $1,000 that we have invested in signs, and we haven't deployed many of them because they haven't been needed at this point. And I think your point too, as we have construction continuing, if we do have complaints, we have a ready to have them. How many times have we had to put them up, Natalie?
Council, we have not put up any of the signs quite yet, 'cause I was working on developing a policy, and then with the change of leadership, it just kind of fell through in terms of priorities. So we have not utilized any of the signs, and we saw a significant reduction in complaints in 2023 from our 2022 complaints. The thinking under the previous leadership and city staff leadership was that it would be something we could deploy once a development had reached 3 complaints, was what we were going to propose as part of the policy. And not, I think Tavera was the only one that hit 3, but not all of those were confirmed by police. So we have not done. We've not deployed any of the signs. We certainly can move this up in terms of priorities. We would just need to rework that with our 2024 work plan where that falls. And the other thing I'll point out is it took a while to get these signs. So when these were made in 2022, it basically came out to about $86.81 a sign. And the process started in October. The signs were finally delivered to us at the end of March. So it'd be difficult to do it on a development by development basis. If we want more signs, we really should do it as a bulk order. And
Do we think that would still be as backlogged in terms of?
I simply don't know. I don't know enough about sign companies. For 10 signs, it seemed like a lot. And they originally quoted me that they should be available by beginning of February. And it was further backlogged than that.
Okay.
Could we look at requiring it as part of their development, well, as part of the development plan, but as part of having them requested to put that in their construction rule signs? They all post them.
So that was something that I spoke with the city attorney about, and once we start talking about requiring them to put it in one of their signs, we are entering into a territory where we are regulating content of a sign, which infringes on free speech rights.
Well, I think we can get around that if we give them an option to either put it in or rent a sign from us.
But that still doesn't do anything about our current development. We can certainly put that as policy going forward. I still think a policy in terms of complaints received would be helpful for the existing developments where we already have a development agreement in place.
I think a good policy, I like the number 3. I think it would be better if it was based on documented violation rather than police confirmed violation. Meaning, if somebody has a video or a ring camera or a photo showing the issue, I feel like that should be enough to trigger a sign if we get to that threshold.
I do think we've had some successes when there's been concerns about some construction hours in working with our developers, and their on-site managers have proactively engaged. Correct me if I'm wrong on that, Kevin. Most recently, we've been able to resolve some resident concerns by them proactively on site managing it rather than us managing it.
Yeah, I think it's always an ongoing give and take conversation for sure, but I think that's how it's gonna be most successful.
One miscellaneous thought that I had in terms of just trying to maximize where we put this at least initial batch of signs is we could potentially kind of hit the St. Therese downtown area with maybe adding it to our rotating digital sign. That way we kind of get anyone passing that way, not just that's working on those sites, but also just in the city. And then, yeah, I think we're on the right track in terms of 3, however it's documented, whether it's a ring or picture or I think police verification, that wouldn't necessarily be.
I think that's an or, not an
Yeah.
and, yeah.
To kind of establish where the limited number of signs go initially, and then look at, like kind of you were saying, adding some language to however we can do it, working with the city attorney to require them, and maybe it's adding something to the fee schedule for that sign. Because for most developments, we have a couple that are one phasers, but right now, but in general, they're multi-year projects that I think we can order them, and hopefully won't be as delayed as it was in 2022, with things not being quite as wonky right now with shipping. So that would be, I guess, where I'd start with it.
So if I understand guidance, for a first phase, we'll work at refining a policy that focuses on 3 complaints of when we engage with developers to put up a sign. And then we'll explore possibilities going forward, whether that's a fee schedule or a rental or sign, and work with our attorney who had expressed concerns about that to see how much flexibility we have in developing that, putting that as a requirement on the developers. Do I understand, Guy?
Yep.
May I, what's the timeline for this work to be back in front of council?
Well, I think I'd like to see some of the stuff done sooner than later, like in terms of maybe adding that digital sign and getting the existing signage where we know we need it. Tavera has 3. Sooner than later, maybe we have some more flexibility on the policy drafting if need be.
Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't think it'd be that, I don't think it'd be that difficult to develop a policy on when you have to deploy a sign. But if you get it into the construction contract, you can deploy it right away. You just have them, I think there's an easy way to incentivize them to put it in their own sign from day one. So,
I'll explore that with the attorney for long-term development. And then in the near term, we could implement something soon with a policy to come forward at a future date.
Perfect.
Is that acceptable?
That sounds great. With that, do we need a motion on this item? I don't know.
I think it was just informational.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, it was an update, yep. And then,
If I could clarify, just
Yes, please.
right now, we only have one area that meets that 3 threshold, and so just to clarify with guidance, the expectation would be just in one area.
To be clear, for these past
That was in
developments.
2023.
Well, and to be fair, these past developments, that we can't rechange the development agreement. Tavera, potentially a new phase can, but one where we already have development agreements, and we might not get another one, it would be a code change. So there is a bit that would go into this update to have it really be addressed.
Yeah, I'm not talking about the document.
Or maybe
Talking
we-
about just signage in the near term, right?
Can we just place it in right-of-way? Have the city place the sign?
I'd have to look at the code. I don't know that, right away, we typically don't want any signs. I don't know if we want to break our own rules. So I'll see what code says about city signs and right of way.
The street signs and stop signs in my yard are in the right of way, and no one has complained.
No, that's fair. But I we can certainly look at that.
I'd say look at that, and then maybe for the, like you were saying, the developments that are ongoing and will be continuing for a while, that have a development agreement in place that we don't anticipate changing, we can't get that into that. Maybe we focus these 10 signs on the developments that have the complaint threshold and or the developments that we can't feasibly get in a development agreement, such as, you know, a bellwether, Tavera, we've already met the other way. You know, potentially a Hope site if, you know, if that passes, stuff like that. Although that one you could, well, gets complicated. But you get what I'm saying in terms of developments that we have an established agreement that we can't easily add this to. Maybe we focus our first 10 signs in those developments.
And I do want to celebrate the success that we've had. So for example, in Ravinia right now, as we have ongoing working with the on-site managers, they at their expense have put up signage in order to try and help manage without us telling them that they have to. They're trying to be good partners. And so that's happening in a positive relationship as we proactively communicate and collaborate with them to solve our problems.
Great, anything else on that one? Okay. On the last item, is there one more?
Yeah, I pulled 7K.
Go right ahead, John.
It's sort of just I wanted to pull it out, kind of for the public, but also for us to keep in mind as we decide whether we continue the canine program in our town. With the stats that we have, Jay sent some additional ones, and I thought one of the questions I'd always asked is if the canine program is effective, does it lead to arrests, convictions? We don't have convictions. That's a little bit out of our discretion. The county doesn't seem to do a real good job of prosecuting nowadays, but we can only do what we can do. So some of the things missing, additional pieces are that 78 of the 193 deployments had charges stemming. And then 87 of those deployments took place in Corcoran. So I wanted to add that to the public conversation, that's all.
Gotcha. Any thoughts from council on kind of the question of interest in continuing the program at some point?
I'm still interested in it.
As am I.
I'm still interested, and then one more thing to add as far as an expense goes, when the officer gets to size, fitted, and budget for a canine vest, I know Zeke never had one. I don't know why, if there's a reason and such, and then the handler doesn't want one, so to speak, but I kind of love my animals, and there's something there that I think it's worth the value, and if it's a huge expense and stuff, I'd consider donating just because. So just some FYI on that, but I'm still interested in doing it. A while back I was wondering, because correct me if I'm wrong, Matt, Plymouth has 2,
At least, I think they have more.
Maple Grove,
They have
2,
canines?
Yes.
I'm not sure what their program's at right now.
Rogers is
They
1 or
have
2.
Yeah.
So I mean, we got those to lean on and stuff. My big thing is if we have officers that have rethought and are thinking now of they would like that, they'd like to commit to that, and I don't think it's an opportunity, I think it's a commitment, and it's a way of life for them and such. I'd be interested also still
Yeah, and
supporting it.
appreciate that. I mean, one of the points, you mentioned that Zeke was deployed 87 times, but that doesn't include the number of times we deployed other agencies' dogs in our
Right.
community as well. And I think part of the discussion when bringing on Zeke as our canine officer was that we use the surrounding communities' canines for help in our community, and that us providing a dog when we had a person on was our way of contributing back to those agencies whose canines we used while they were absent as well. So it really is it is a regional asset, and we give and take from that regional pool. So, and the reason this was in here was really to hear back from the council, because there would be staff time in compiling information for consideration for that. We can get better information and more clarity for the council going forward as to what this would look like and what the recommendation would be for continuing that program.
That'd be great. I think it'd be good to have some discussion at some point of options in terms of what future canine would be trained in. Zeke was dual trained apprehension and drugs.
Yep.
So whether that's the best route, or there's one or the other, or a different use that is maybe looking at what's in the region, what our department needs the most. That can all be stuff you bring back to us, but just something to think about.
And I guess one of the things, at that informational meeting, we have had so the trainer that we've used in the past for our canine has offered to be present for those conversations.
Okay.
Would you guys like us to try and arrange for him to be here? And he can get into the more technical aspects of which levels of training, value, cost, weighted benefit for different approaches. If you guys would prefer that, I can see if he's available.
Like for a work session?
Either whether you guys want this as a work session or a council agenda item is up to you.
I'd love to have an expert here
Yeah.
guiding us and helping
I'd love
us.
to hear from them. I'm trying to think in terms of work session or meeting, which is better and more appropriate given how much time we'll need.
Yeah, the urgency on it, or the timeline on it, is I think we're a little bit too late to get into any spring classes. So I think we would be targeting a fall class.
Okay.
If we elected to move forward, our trainer orders, and because he warranties the dogs, he has an order and a supplier and a place that he likes to go through where he's vetted the quality of dogs that are available. So I think the earliest we could probably shoot for is likely if he's running a fall class, but we would want to probably have our decision made so that we could get our name on the list for those fall classes probably by mid to late spring. So that would be the timeline that we would want to target for you to have the information and try and make that determination if we're going to proceed.
Perfect.
Do we have an officer that's interested?
I have had one officer approach me and say that he would be interested in it. If we elect to move forward, we would have a formal process where people could apply for it, and we would interview and evaluate and go through that.
So when I was on council, when we originally had the K-9 program initiated, and it was controversial actually at the time. And so now we have data to back, and I'm glad we're talking about which particular kind of dog we would get, rather than, we spent a lot of time sorting through whether we'd even have a canine. So it's been helpful and good. I do want to have some sort of clarification on that language, because it might be gray, whether the dog is the property of the city or the property of the officer. Both times we've had an officer depart, there's been a wish to have the dog go with. And we should probably have some clarifying language as to whether I don't know what language.
Give us some sort of guidelines in terms
Yeah.
of age, years of service.
I almost want it to be very clear that the dog is the property of the city of Corcoran.
Which it is.
Yes, and if they would like to ask for an exception to that, like we did allow Clay to take the dog because of its age and years of service and all that. But I would rather have it crystal clear that the dog is the
default is that it's
yes,
the city's. Yeah.
yes.
So I would say that is part of in the past, it's been part of the process, that acknowledgement, that's part of their training. They're instructed on that, and that is part of their deployment. I think it's more of, in the past requests were based more on their bond and their desire for it, and their belief in their best interest for their dog and themselves. So I don't think there's been any lack of clarity, but I think to your point is maybe there's a lack of expectations on when would the city be willing to make exceptions, or what kind of factors go into that consideration. Might be helpful to have those on the front end so they can anticipate what the factors will be in those considerations.
Yeah, I think almost like a ladder fee. It's hard to put a dollar value to the animal, obviously, but if we lose one to an officer, we will have to replace it if we want to maintain the program. So some kind of a prorating based upon years of service seems to make sense as a way to be humane to the animal, humane to the officer, and not shortchange the city for the cost we would have to incur to replace that officer.
I would think we could come up with a schedule. I mean, it's going to be really subjective, right? But come up with a schedule just like we do when we replace other assets in the city, long-term assets, like a car. I mean, depending on where it is, the dog's life cycle, and where it is, its service life, and all that. So, something that they understand up front too. That if they leave at year 6, they don't have a chance. If the dog still has 4 or 5 years of service.
Yeah, some sort of, I don't know what the specific steps are, but yeah, something like that. I think would be fine.
There's got to be other canine units out there that have clear code, clearly written, and I'm sure our attorney will be able to find that information to make it clear. The emotions and stuff that are involved in this are unbelievable, but there is an exception, and it'd be nice if we could come up with something that was, Jeremy said it, is humane a good word? Humane to both the dog and the handler. They're both officers. They're both critical to us, so.
All set? That everything you need?
Yes, thank you.
Thank you, guys.
Then that is everything, I believe, on consent, unless there's anything I'm missing that we pulled. I don't think so.
Good.
Okay, then we will move into planning business, which we just have one item, 8A. Give me 1 second here, and then we will start with the public comment opportunity for item 8A. And I have some cards here we'll start with, and then if anyone else would like to go, we can jump into that. Well, yeah, we can get that going after, the slides and everything going after public comment. So, George Gamach.
Okay. And I take it the first item is the hope item?
Sorry, yes, it's the first and only item on planning.
Okay, because I did look at the agenda earlier and there was another one.
One that got moved,
Okay.
tabled off, yep.
I did bring along with me a map. Map is from 1958. It's what Corcoran looked like when I was a kid. If you look at it, there's only a few tarred roads. Most of them are gravel. The population of Corcoran hasn't changed much from about 1880 until about 1965. It was at about, I think, about 1,800 people, something like that. It was quite agricultural. Everything was, people knew everybody. It was quite a different environment.
George, did you bring a map for us?
Yes, it's right in front. You came in late, John, so you didn't get to
You don't get to see it, John.
I was on time,
Yes.
and I have my own maps from 1958 also.
Later, yes.
I think John has, do you have the copy of it? Or do you
No,
wanna
these
see
are
that?
mine, but they look exactly like that one.
Thank you, though.
So some of us live in
Except George's is bigger.
houses that were built in the
Yeah.
60s and 70s. At that time, there were some farms that developed into small individual areas. And I think we all know where they are. Jackie Lane is one example, but there's several around the community. There wasn't really, any sewer or water or anything. Everybody was kind of on their own. In 1980, we began using the comprehensive plan approach. It was our first one. And I was appointed to the Planning Commission in 1981 in January. And so it became my task to implement that first comprehensive plan in my first year as a planning commissioner. And the second year I took over the job of planner for a year before we actually hired a real planner, Gary Idle. But what we attempted to do in those days was really to preserve the agricultural community, and the emphasis behind all of our planning at that time was how much farmland can we preserve? And that over time has morphed. It's morphed into a different approach. We've had a series of comprehensive plans every 10 years, and every 10 years it changes. We add maybe a little bit more to the MUSA and more definition to the MUSA. What we've experienced, however, is during this period of time, development has leapfrogged into Wright County primarily. The areas around Hanover, Buffalo, Rockford, St. Michael, all of those areas have developed significantly because people left the Hennepin County area because there wasn't land available here. We were restricting development. It was a 1 in 10 regime at that point in time. And so they had to leap. And they left because it was cheaper to build over there, the taxes were lower, et cetera, et cetera. But all of that throws traffic our direction. And so those of us who live in the western side of Corcoran and probably most of the central part of Corcoran really are not that much affected by what goes on in the east where this development is proposed. Most of what we're affected by is what has already leapt beyond us into the adjacent county, which was outside of the metropolitan planning district. And this also occurred in Sherburne County because Sherburne was not included and it affected Anoka, etc. So what my point is that development is going to occur, much to our dislike in some cases because we kind of have, like the old Corcoran maybe at some point in time, and there's a lot of people in the community that still feel that way. But I think as time goes on, we do need to look at the opportunity for people to develop in an orderly fashion so cities can really just control the order in which development occurs, not necessarily whether it occurs or not. It's the market that really drives whether or not there's going to be development. And 20 years ago we didn't have a market that was pushing into Corcoran that hard. But 10 years ago it started, and it's been continuing on and on since. 20 years ago when Hope came in here and I was sitting on the city council, I was not particularly crazy about the big plan because I could see that it was a little bit premature. We didn't have sewer and water available at that time, but it's there today. So we've gotten to the point where now what they're proposing is a very feasible type of development. And yes, there are going to be some impacts on the immediately adjacent neighbors.
I'm going to, one second, motion to extend.
Second.
Still had a little bit of time. I paused when you got interrupted before,
Okay.
but sure. Do we have a second?
Second.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Okay, so the proposal that's in front of us right now really is something that's not going to occur overnight. Market is going to dictate how fast it happens. My prediction would be that it might be 10 to 15 years before we see the majority of this develop, just simply because they have to find people who are willing to put up the money to build these buildings and operate these buildings. It's not going to happen right away. Some of it will probably start fairly soon, and that will help to provide the funds to continue on with the development as time goes on. At the Planning Commission, there were some comments about traffic. And right now, I think the comment was that there's about 3,000 cars a day on County Road 30, which in my mind isn't that much. We had about 1,000 cars a day in 1986 when we traded 97th Avenue. And that was a gravel road at the time. So 3,000 is not a lot, particularly when you consider that it's spread out over the course of a day. There was also some concern about 10 trips per day that was thrown out per household. The types of development that are being proposed here don't seem to be quite in that same category. In fact, I looked up how many trips a day actually happen in senior attached housing. It's 3.7 is the average. That's a national number. I looked at the amount of driving that's done by people that are in seniors housing, and the people that drive the least are the 65-year-old plus women who only drive 5,000 miles or less per year. And that's who's going to primarily occupy that type of residential community. all of us guys drive off and they're, you know, our spouses live on and they don't drive that much. They have to drive to the grocery store. But when they drive to the grocery store, they're going to Maple Grove. When they go to work, they're going to go to Maple Grove. They're all going to be driving in that direction. So the most critical thing probably in the future is going to be upgrading County Road 30 from 116 to 101 to match what's on the other side in Maple Grove. There's some legitimate concerns about water, and that's always a challenge for engineers to try to figure out how can we mitigate the outflow of water. And that again just affects those people that are right next door. It really is not something that's going to be a massive impact on the remainder of Corcoran. So I think today is probably a time when we could look at saying, let's go forward with this. And let's give these folks a chance to do what their plan says that they're going to do. This just gets them across the starting line. It doesn't get them to the finish line. The finish line is really going to be driven by market. That's it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Appreciate your comments. Jason?
Good evening, Jason Bartles, 19795 Hunters Ridge, Corcoran. Mr. Mayor, members of council, thank you for the opportunity to speak tonight. I'm representing residents of Hunters Ridge East across 116 on the east side. Across 116 from this development, we're on the east side of the road as opposed to the west. We've known for some time about development plans for this area. With that development comes new residents, vehicles, and obviously with vehicles comes traffic. Yes, I was one of the planning commission, talked about traffic. Absolutely. That's a huge, huge safety concern. We can debate numbers. Your 3.7 per elderly resident. I don't dispute that.
You only can talk to us.
You're right. I'm sorry. I just know that even during the planning commission meeting, one of the commissioners raised the point that she was shocked that there was such a high percentage of non-elderly, non-seniors going to be part of this development, and that's obviously going to skew the numbers. There's an attachment in this packet, attachment 8A7 in the documentation packet that predicts annual average daily traffic volume to be approximately 9,000 trips per day on the roadways within this development. If I'm mistaken, I'll stand corrected, but I read that a couple days ago. The bulk of that traffic will be competing for access at the intersection of Highway 116 and Hunters Ridge. Basically, there's one way in and out of that development. Yes, there's a proposed access down in the southwest corner directly to County Road 30, but that's going to come way later in Phase 3. That particular intersection, 116 and Hunters Ridge, and the tremendous amount of traffic utilizing it will cause distinct safety concerns, can't begin to bear near that volume of traffic. Westbound traffic from Hunters Ridge will have an extremely difficult time turning on southbound 116. We learned at the Planning Commission meeting earlier this month, Hennepin County wasn't interested in adding additional access to and from the development. We hope that could be reconsidered with council's input as fellow residents and drivers in Corcoran. In addition to the traffic issues, there's other big concerns in this proposal, specifically the excessive number of requests to deviate from the Corcoran building code requirements. Planning Commissioner Chair Mark Landerman, he was here. He said during the Planning Commission meeting, the building height and setback variance requests were drastic departures from requirements. In reading the entire proposal once again, it contains many, many requests for variances, flexibility, and deviations. It's been stated this project is going to set the bar for other Corcoran developments to come. That's a challenging task for this council to determine where that bar will be going forward. Does rural Corcoran really want to embrace 4-story apartment buildings? I certainly hope not.
I'm gonna make a motion to extend.
Second.
All right, thank you, appreciate that. Take County Road 30 east into Maple Grove and look at all the tall eyesore buildings going up on the north side of that road. Let's please not turn rural Corcoran into that. I'll circle back and end where I started with traffic. While the proposed building heights and setback reductions are visually unpleasant, most importantly, the traffic concerns represent a safety risk. to all Corcoran residents that are impacted by this project. We respectfully request, as this project moves forward, the council keep this important safety issue in the forefront of the decision making. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Sean, quick question. Or, Dean, go ahead.
Just for future folks, if we've got more names and stuff, we do listen intensely, so if you're gonna repeat what was said, make it short, if that makes sense. Planning commission meeting went good 2.5 hours with people just repeating, so just, we are listening to every word you guys are saying, so thank you. Go ahead.
Absolutely. John, what have you been using for the time?
I just use the timer, 3 minutes.
3? Okay. Just want to make sure we're on the same time. Okay,
It is
and
3 minutes, isn't it?
it's 3 or 5 typically, and I don't think I specified beforehand, but that makes sense, and we've been able to extend when necessary. Sean, I don't have a last name on this one. Perfect. Go right ahead.
Hi, my name is Sean. I'm here today to discuss the project with the Hope Community Church. I too had concerns about traffic and rule variances, and as a landowner in Corcoran, land variances and exceptions to the code are supposed to be done by hardships or what have you. The Hope Community Church is asking for a PUD status, and part of their status they're asking for countless number of exceptions. I won't get into that because I understand I have a time limit. My ask is that due to the traffic and due to the, this project can be done and can be done, it's still going to be done if we have fewer houses in there. That will reduce the number of traffic. I ask that we maybe limit, like this is project 1, this can only be done until such and such improvements are done to the roads. Project 2 can only be done if improvements to County Road 30 or 116 are done, or additional exits. I don't know, I'm just trying to summarize here. I don't know, I guess in the end, I'm just asking that the city follows, exceptions to the city code should be done for specific needs, and I don't see that there's major benefits. The benefits that I'm seeing per this request for a PUD status is mainly for the development itself and not for the community at large. So I'm asking that we reject the PUD and make the project developers follow the code, which in essence will reduce the number, make fewer homes and be fewer trips and fewer congestion, and just, anyways. And the only person that's going to lose here is just the developer will make a little bit less money. So that's my request, is that we just slightly limit the number of homes, make them follow the rules, unless there's a dire hardship that they can't meet. So.
Just real quick, John, do we have his address? He didn't say that at the beginning.
I was wondering that.
I know where you live, but I'm not gonna come find you.
Yeah.
Comment card, perfect.
Thank you.
Wait, what is the address?
Michelle.
I'm on Duffney Circle.
204
Oh, okay.
Duffney Circle.
I usually like to look at when you speak, I look up your address and just see kind of your perspective from a...
I was a little bit shocked because I only found out about this. I mean, I don't read that much of the newsletters, so that's my own fault. But I was not notified, and I'm less than a quarter mile away from this project. So my suggestion is that you also expand your notifications, because I heard there was only like 15 or 17 people at your initial meeting. That this type of a project, more people that are going to be impacted by it should be involved in it, and that's just my opinion. And what you do for this project is going to be requested by every other project down the road. So, thank you.
Just to touch on that quickly, we did recently just about double our notice distance. I think the bigger maybe driver of from 350 feet to 500 or whatever.
300 to 500, yes.
But the big driver that we try that I think has been the biggest help has been the development signs, the blue signs that you might see out on a project before it happens. There should be one or two out in Hope right now. as well as other things like you mentioned, like the website and newsletter and stuff when possible. Okay, that is all the comment cards I have. Is there anyone else who would like to speak? Going once, going twice. Okay, then we will continue on. Council, how would you like to do this? Would you like to hear from staff next, council next?
Do we have a presentation from the applicant?
Do we have, I believe we do. We do.
Staff prepared a presentation, but that can certainly be waived by council. It is about 22 slides, so it is a bit. And then the applicant has also prepared a presentation.
Let's do staff, applicant, discussion.
We had something that we got skipped on that first agenda for a house.
Permit for a variance. Oh, no, it didn't get skipped. I'm so sorry.
No.
I thought you were here for Hope. The Lister Garage did get approved as part of the consent agenda, so that is done. I apologize.
Sorry for the confusion. But
If you would like to stay, you're welcome to stay, but if you'd like to go.
Yeah, sorry, that wasn't clear.
Congrats.
And
Stuff.
for your
Sorry for
reference,
stressing
you
you
were
out there.
7H and it was thumbs up.
Okay, thank you.
Have a good one. Drive safe.
The next slide, 'cause this is horribly inaccurate. It's the planning commission slide. There we go. All right, so council, the item tonight is there's a combination of applicants, including Hope Community Church, Brian and Jackie Lothar, and Corcoran Investments LLC are the landowners, and they are represented by Josh McKinney with Measure Group. The request is for approval of a 40-acre mixed-use development at the northwest corner of County Road 116 and County Road 30, and will surround the existing Hope Community Church site. For some background, Hope Community Church is an existing institution, and the subject parcels were purchased over 20 years ago with a long-term vision to create a campus that provides places of multiple age groups to live, work, dine, and worship. The church was approved in 2001, and a concept plan was shared at that time that showed a very similar mixed-use project as what is in front of you tonight. Nothing was approved at that point, but that was shared with the city that this was their long-term vision. A daycare was approved at the church via a conditional use permit in 2005. There was a site plan amendment in 2012 with another conditional use permit for the existing cemetery at the site. And then most recently, the church has worked with the city to sell and site land for a water treatment plant across 116 and a water tower, which is near the church. Next slide. Prior review of the plan that's in front of you tonight included a concept plan reviewed by the council in January 2023. The amount of commercial space in housing units has decreased since the concept plan. An environmental assessment worksheet was conducted and finalized by the city in July of 2023 that did include the traffic and feasibility study for infrastructure. The applicant, city staff, and Three Rivers Park District have worked diligently through another feasibility study regarding the underpass and trail location for the Diamond Lake Regional Trail. And the Parks and Trails Commission reviewed the proposed park dedication in January of this year. At that point, they did recommend relocating the trail to cross Oswald Farm Road and run along the north side of Oswald Farm Road. That's one of the discussion points tonight. Additionally, not on the slide, but the Planning Commission did hold the public hearing and recommended approval of this item on the February 1st regular meeting. Slide. So this is, at this point, anticipated to be a 4-phase development and includes 641 housing units and a little over 80,000 square feet of commercial space. So Hope Community Church, that site will become a 13-acre parcel, and it will include the church, existing cemetery, a future cemetery expansion, and a top lot is also shown on this property. There is a multifamily A building noted on the site plan, which would include 148 market rate units. Retail B is one of the commercial spaces and about 10,000 square feet. The thinking for that would be some kind of retail or a cafe, something along those lines would fit in there. And then 2 medical buildings, around 30,000 square feet each. And then one additional retail building, about another 10,000 square feet, and that would comprise the commercial portion of the project, and that's located in the southeast corner of the site. And then as part of the commercial project, or commercial portion, there is a shared parking lot that would serve all of these commercial buildings. Multifamily F is the second market rate apartments. About 184 units are proposed. And then we enter into the senior component. So there is a senior housing building with 122 age-restricted units. At this point, a continuum of care is expected. So that could be all, not all, but there could be independent living units, as well as units that require more nursing care and hospice. And additionally, 28 memory care units are being reserved at this time. An active senior building of 110 age-restricted units that would be specifically for independent living seniors.
Can I ask a quick question,
Yes.
Natalie? Senior housing, 122 age-restricted units with 28 memory care units. Is that 28 in addition to the 122?
Correct. So memory care units do not include kitchens, so they do not count as housing units in terms of density. So, but there are 122 units currently proposed that would count towards the density. Because they would have some type of kitchen. Now that mix could change. There could be some hospice units that would not have kitchens. But at this time, we're reviewing it, assuming that they're all independent units, because it has more weight on our park dedication and a few things like that. And then when the final phase, final PUD, final plat comes in for that phase, we'll have a better idea of what that final mix is, and we'll go from there.
Gotcha. Sorry.
No, I appreciate the clarification. So there are villas shown as well, and this is comprised of 20 detached and 6 attached twin homes, and these would be age restricted for seniors as well. And then we have row homes. These would not be age restricted. This includes 51 townhomes ranging from 6 to 8 units per building. Also, as a part of the site, the Three Rivers Diamond Lake Regional Trail and underpass across County Road 116. And there are also a combination of public and private paths throughout the site in addition to the regional trail. Next slide.
One quick question, if you don't have the answer, Natalie, you probably have thought about this or may know it off the top of your head. If we were to follow the ordinances that the city has right now, and if this were to come through as normal, what would the population be of,
How many housing units?
how many housing units would be in this property or per ordinance numbers? Just, if you've already thought about it, great, just something to think about if you can answer that
I do have a slide that goes
down.
over the density as is and was proposed. So I think that'll answer your question. If not, let me know and we can
Yep,
definitely.
again, the variety, everything here, it's a plan, but if we were to go by the letter of the law, it was a comment made, and I've been wondering that. I think I have a number in my head, but numbers are goofy to me sometimes.
You got a lot of stuff in your head.
I got a lot.
And a lot of it's goofy.
A lot of it's goofy.
So this is the site plan. North is actually to the right, since it's kind of such a rectangular shape, you have to kind of have it on its side. But so again, we have the multifamily in what it would be the top left corner. We have our first multifamily building A. We go down into the commercial corner, into another multifamily on 116. And then we have our row homes being the furthest north component along 116. And then we cross the internal street, those are the villas, the detached villas. And if we cross what's, the plan's noted as Hopeway, but it will actually be 100th Avenue. Then we have these senior buildings and 6 detached villas on the top. Yep. So that is the basic rundown. Next slide.
I like Hopeway.
I was going to say, is that set in stone?
Yes.
Our numbring system is so boring.
It is set in stone.
I like Hopeway. I'll keep saying it. Say it enough, it'll change.
So There was a lot of, as people have said, there was a lot of talk on transportation, so I wanted to make sure I specifically called out the transportation improvements in this presentation. So as part of the feasibility report and EAW process, there are several improvements that need to occur on County Road 30 and County Road 116 in order to support this development and would be funded and required of the developer. So County Road 30 and County Road 116, there needs to be construction of dedicated westbound right turn lane, 300 feet in length, at County Road 116 and Hunters Ridge, Oswald Farm. Widen the eastbound Oswald Farm and widen westbound Hunters Ridge to provide a 200 feet left turn lane and through right lane. And then at the new County Road 30 access shown on the plan, they would be required to construct a 300-foot eastbound left turn and westbound right turn lane on County Road 30 and construction southbound approach with a 200-foot left turn and right turn lanes. So all this to say there are several improvements that would need to occur, but it is a requirement in order for this to move forward. Next slide. So there are several components to the application. The first component that would need to occur would be approval of a comprehensive plan amendment. So currently all 28 acres of the existing church site is guided as public, semi-public in our 2040 comprehensive plan. The 3 other parcels in the proposal are guided mixed use. The applicant requests the northern 15 acres of the church site be re-guided as mixed use to allow for the proposed variety in senior housing units. This is ultimately, and so that's the area in purple. This is ultimately a policy decision that has a high degree of city discretion, and factors that should be considered in this decision are detailed in the staff report. Staff recommends approval of the future land use change as it will allow reasonable development and will simply extend the boundary of the mixed-use land designation in this area. The higher density consolidated in this area will help to contribute to the city's overall density goal and would be factored into the 2050 comprehensive plan update, assuming final plats have been submitted by that point. And the applicant may also touch on this, but I did confirm that up until our 2030 comprehensive plan, and I put this in the staff report, this entire area was shown as mixed use. So that was a recent change when the city decided to implement a public, semi-public land designation for our churches and public buildings. And that's when the church parcel changed, but previously had all been a mixed use area, both in our comprehensive plan and our Northeast District plan. Next slide. The second component is a rezoning to the PUD. The PUD is a zoning district, so these aren't variances being requested, but these are areas where we are negotiating the standards of the district. And the properties are currently zoned for public institution and general mixed use. The entire site, including the existing church, is requested to be rezoned as the PUD. If the comprehensive plan amendment is approved, the rezoning will be consistent with the underlying land use districts. The site for Hope Community Church will be held to the PI standards, and the rest of the site will be developed in accordance with the mixed use land designation with the deviations as approved as part of the PUD plan. There are several standards the city must consider when deciding to rezone, and again, those are outlined in the staff report. This is another policy decision where the city has a high degree of discretion. Staff believes there are findings of fact that support the rezoning should the comprehensive plan amendment be approved. Next slide. Density. So mixed-use density calculations in our 2040 comprehensive plan assume approximately half of the mixed-use acreage will develop at a density of 8 to 30 units per acre. So without the comprehensive plan amendment, the current mixed-use land, we would assume about 100 to 378 housing units on this property, on this site. With the requested comprehensive plan, the estimated net acreage would increase, and it would be an estimated 175 to 656 housing units for the site anticipated. The applicant's proposal includes 641 housing units. And then when you take out just the residential portion of the project, which makes up about 33.5 net acres, this comes out to a pre-development density of 19 units per acre. where 8 to 30 units per acre are assumed. So the proposed density does comply with the mixed-use land designation to support the comprehensive plan amendment and rezoning. Next slide. So for the preliminary PUD plan, which is the next component of the application, there are several flexibilities requested by the applicant's narrative, and additionally, staff identified additional areas where we would need to address flexibilities from the underlying district, which is pretty typical that the applicant's narrative calls out a few, but staff finds more as we dig through it. So first being a deviation in lot square footage standards for the villa units, a setback reduction for the buildings along County Road 116 and County Road 30, a shared parking lot for the commercial uses. This is a flexibility that is allowed in the GMU without needing a variance, but you do have to go through a process to grant it. So we would authorize this use as part of the PUD plan. Parking reductions throughout the project area. Again, some flexibility for this is already allowed in the GMU without needing a variance, but we need to call it out as part of the PUD plan. Allowance of the townhomes, twin homes, and detached villas in the GMU where only apartment buildings would otherwise be allowed. So they're actually requesting to have a less intense product along the northern boundary of the project than would otherwise be required for a general mixed use, under our current general mixed use district. A flexibility to shift required landscaping materials from some portions of the site to allow for improved buffering at the edges of the site.
Natalie, can I
Yeah.
interrupt? I'm going to interrupt. Can I ask you a question?
Mhm.
Do this, what was the setback reduction in feet?
Yeah, I think I do go into it. Pretty sure I do in my slides. There's a lot of them, but I think the reduction is...
Preview of the next
Yes.
slides.
So the reduction would be 50 feet with enhanced landscaping, where we would require 60 feet with enhanced landscaping. Additionally, we have the GMU has a setback requirement for stories of the heights of the building, and so there would be a deviation from that as well. So I think it's like 75 feet setback for the apartment buildings based on their height, and so they're requesting that they don't have that height-based setback, and it just be flat 50 feet with the enhanced landscaping.
Thank you.
To follow up on that, enhanced landscaping as proposed, is that enhanced landscaping from the 100 to the 50 the same, or is it additional enhanced landscaping that you could do from the 100 to 60 and then 60 to 50?
So right now, it is per the clause in our code that allows for enhanced landscaping to reduce it to 60, and so they're proposing that same amount of landscaping, but with a setback of 50 feet.
Okay.
We could theoretically add additional landscaping. One thing I'd like to point out is public safety would really prefer that we allow for landscaping to be clustered and not require significant screening so that you can access those buildings from the county roads. So just something to keep in mind. We can certainly look at adding more. We just want to make sure that it's doable for public safety to access those buildings.
Gotcha. Thank you.
Was there any other initial questions?
On the density one, I was looking at it differently. If
Okay.
this was to be all residential,
Mm-hmm.
there could be as many as
So if it were
30
all,
times 43 acres is 1,290 dwellings.
yeah, if theoretically, if we were to allow them to do 100% residential at 30 units per acre, it'd be 1,290.
Per our ordinance's letter of the law, so to speak,
Yeah.
roughly.
Yeah, I would say
1,200.
our comprehensive plan uses the word approximately half would be developed at 8 to 30 units per acre for residential.
Because we have to follow those rules too.
Yeah, it's definitely worded loosely, so I think I think what's proposed meets that intent. I would say something that came in at 100% probably wouldn't.
Okay.
But yeah,
Thank you. Thank you. You got a lot more to go. Go get them. Real quick too, there was talk about the Northeast standards. Are they in here someplace too, as far as landscape
believe-
standards and everything else?
I believe so, yep.
Because I thought what you had said at the planning commission, that those northeast standards are over and above a lot of these standards, and they were developed by our planning commission. You, a number of residents were involved in that northeast standard plan and stuff, and I want to make sure we're using it. I think you said that supersedes anything. If it's more strict there, they've got to abide by that if this were to go through.
Yes, so just to
Okay.
clarify, there's some standards between the GMU and the Northeast District that simply conflict, and it's not clear what is better. They're just different.
Okay.
And so the argument at the Planning Commission was, the GMU was developed in 2004. I'm not really certain on the history and the involvement of the community in that development of those standards, whereas our Northeast policy is something that we put a lot of attention into as a city with several outreach opportunities and survey opportunities. And so the argument was, let's just let the Northeast
Yeah.
District supersede where there is a conflict or confusion. So.
Thank you.
So relief from a section of code in the GMU, which requires a grade separation on all housing units accessing the building on the first level. Again, this didn't really seem to be something that made sense for products that were part of a multifamily. So because the GMU was not developed for detached and townhomes and things like that. Flexibility from landscape island parking-based spacing standards, which are within the Northeast District for the commercial parking lot. And then flexibility from the restriction on drive-through lanes abutting a public right-of-way. Next slide. And then staff identified additional flexibilities, as I said before, for the commercial and multifamily building. The front setback from major roadways would be 50 feet with enhanced landscaping. The maximum principal building height would be 50 feet at the minimum setback for multifamily buildings. There would be a restriction to 2 stories for the medical buildings, just due to the parking requirements to make sure that there is enough parking for the square footage of those buildings. The public institution side setback would not be applied to an underground connection that's shown between the senior housing building and the church. And that's the only reason why the church parcel is a part of the PUD, because of that connection between the 2 buildings. The detached villas would have a minimum lot area of 5,285 square feet, a minimum lot width of 44 feet, and a side setback of 7.5 feet. The attached villas would have a front setback of 25 feet, side setback of 10, rear setback of 25. And these are measured from the effective lot line of the base lot for these attached units. Next slide. This is a slide prepared by the applicant to provide some context as to the height of the building based on the current structures there. So we have the water tower and the existing church bell tower compared to the proposed flat roof 4-story apartment buildings, and then go into the residential. So just to kind of give some perspective on how the height compares to the other uses in the area. Next slide.
What, can we go back there just for a sec? So, on the property line and to the, I'm not sure what direction, to the left, basically.
That's north.
There's is that an existing, the existing trees, 45 to 70 feet. So the trees along the multi-story or multifamily 4-story structure would not be as dense, or is this not an accurate representation of the expected density of the buildings, of the trees?
Yeah, so this is illustrative in nature. It's just reflecting that those trees are not at the cut line where this image is taken. They're just further back in the image. So I can, in my presentation, I speak
That's,
on this.
yeah.
So
I just want to see if has any semblance of accuracy when it comes to tree coverage, because one of the things you're going to ask for or have asked for is a an exception to some of the buffer from the road, and part of what I think we'd be encouraged by is how tall and how dense that 50 feet of trees is going to be.
Yeah, so.
But if it would look like that, then that wouldn't be good. We would.
Understood.
So.
I understand what you're saying. I'm not asking for an exception. I'll
Yeah, no, it's fair. I just wanted to know if this accurately reflected the tree proposals. It doesn't sound like it does. That's it.
And I would say this is also viewing it from the Katharaki property.
Right.
So you're looking west, or no, I'm sorry, you're looking east.
Yeah, okay.
So that property line, go
Yeah.
there, those trees would stay.
Okay.
All right, next slide. I think I just tried to break it up with a visual because now we're back to the lot analysis. Minimum lot area for the townhomes is 4,500 square feet per unit. So you're taking the, basically the common lot area and then you're dividing it per unit to get that minimum lot size. And then the front setback actually is 50 feet. That is a typo. The front setback would be from other streets that are not a county road would be 25 feet. The side setback is 10 feet from the base lot line and 15 feet between attached structures, so the separation between the attached structures. And then a rear setback of 25 feet. And then for the parking, there is a parking setback of 10 feet along Oswald Farm Road for the multifamily buildings, which is a deviation. Typically, we would require 25 feet. And then there would be no interior setback required for the shared commercial parking lot. Arguably, this is an oversight in our parking ordinance, as shared parking lots are allowed within the GMU, and the GMU has no minimum side setback. So it just seems to be a conflict, short-sighted conflict within our underlying code. A parking setback of 15 feet along Oswald Farm Road for the senior housing, again, where 25 feet would typically be required. And then the applicant is asking for parking requirement reductions. So it'd be 2 spaces per unit for multifamily buildings, 1.5 spaces per unit for senior housing and active senior buildings, and then 415 spaces shared for the commercial space. There was a parking study completed that was confirmed. The data was confirmed by Stantec, our consulting engineer group, which supported these numbers. And in fact, the 2 spaces per unit for multifamily buildings, that is actually in excess of what that study supported, but I really wanted to make sure that we had 2 considering the lack of public transportation. And it seemed to be in line with what other cities in similar situations are requiring right now for multifamily buildings. That's how we got to 2.
Is that worth changing our code then if Stantec?
We could absolutely, I do think our parking standards need to be reevaluated, yes. Next slide. So this is just a zoom in of the commercial parking lot.
Should we wait and do that until the state decides whether they're going to rewrite all of our parking standards?
I tend to worry about it once it's actually in law. Otherwise, I proceed as normal because some of those bills will be there for years and not get approved. So.
Well, let's just wait till the legislative session ends.
For those wondering, there was a proposal to eliminate any city's ability to have any control over parking or required parking space. That was released by the legislature the other week.
Yeah, and also even being able to write our own city codes for housing is on the table also.
Yep, it's so,
please pay attention to who you vote for.
So this is just a zoomed in view of the commercial parking lot that would be shared. One of the things that I talk about in my staff report is the landscaping islands and the desire from staff to have some pedestrian pathways within the parking lot, and that would support some deviation from the required parking islands. I believe this plan actually, as it currently is, complies with the parking bays, but I recommend that we have some of the parking bays be more in line with each other, like that exactly, and have 6 of those throughout the lot. even if that means some of the parking bays, instead of 15 spaces, turn into 18 or something along those lines, just so that there's a clear place for pedestrians to go to have clear sight of everything. So, next slide. So staff believes, oh yeah, this is what I was talking about. So staff believes it would be best for the city to decide which site design standards prevail when there is a conflict between the GMU and Northeast District Plan. And the Northeast District Design Standards is what staff recommends because these more accurately reflect the public desires captured as part of our Northeast District Plan, whereas the GMU standards were established in 2004, and this would be the first time they've been put to use. The landscape buffer between parking and public sidewalk street frontage is one of the specific areas identified where there was confusion, letting the Northeast District standard prevail, as well as the building architectural design requirements. Additional deviations include allowing the garage for the detached villas to be up to 70% of the viewable ground floor, where 55% is what we currently require. If you think about it, it's a 44-foot wide lot with 15 feet taken off between both sides. So that leaves about, and if we want two-car garages, which I think we do considering the parking limitations in this area, that would be a 20-foot wide garage, which would be 70% of the viewable ground floor. So, and actually about 69%. So that might be even something we need to relook at or discuss further tonight as to what's more important to us. Do we want to make sure that they have space for recyclables and trash? And do we just want to make it so that the front door is visible for the villas? And then not really care about the specific percentage so that we can ensure that they have a two-car garage? Or do we want this percentage of some sort to prevail? The requirement for two-car garages for the attached homes. Oh, there's a minimum garage size for attached homes. So we have a maximum garage size for single-family homes and a minimum garage size for attached homes. I believe it's 440 square feet for homes with a basement when they're attached, and then 580 square feet if there is no basement. And so right now, as it's currently proposed, there's a concern that the single-family homes will end up having a smaller garage size than what we require for the attached homes, and we just want it to make sense. And right now, staff's proposing that we could potentially remove that minimum garage size and just have a requirement that a two-car garage be provided for the attached homes. We could certainly, I think, we could certainly look at changing that so that we do let the minimum garage size prevail, but then I would say be consistent and have that also be applied to the detached villas. For signs, their site plan shows 4 monument signs throughout the development for the commercial users. They also have 1 monument sign for each residential area, since they are different components. And then they would also need an approval to split the 10% front facade limit for wall signs between the front and rear of the buildings. Next slide. For the proposed benefits of the PUD, the applicant has worked hard to provide an architectural transition between existing uses and the proposed development by locating taller buildings as far away from the existing single-family homes as possible. The PUD will allow for single-family homes and townhomes closest to the existing single-family neighborhood to the north, where the general mixed-use district will only allow multifamily homes in that area. Construction of an east-west connection to future development to the west, that's Hopeway, 100th Avenue, which would provide relief from traffic that otherwise may be routed through Hunter's Ridge should that property to the west develop. And then coordination with city staff to shift existing right-of-way to allow for more economical construction of the water utility lines. Improvement of existing drainage conditions for neighbors to the south of the project area through stormwater routing through the project area. Next slide. Establishment of a significant tax base and services to serve Corcoran and its residents well into the future. They provide a trail easement in excess of 20 feet, which is what we require, to support the Three Rivers Diamond Lake Regional Trail and a grade separated crossing at County Road 116. So we require 20 feet. The Three Rivers is asking for a portion of it to be 50 feet to support the underpass. And the applicant, instead of having Three Rivers acquire the additional feet at a later time, is proposing that we do this holistically now by dedicating that now as part of the PUD as a benefit. The project serves as a vital link for future development in the city of Corcoran.
Just one quick question.
Yep.
Does that create any issue with our cooperative agreement with Three Rivers and how that's supposed to be acquired?
I think you know more about that.
No, there's like 3 options. We can acquire that trail or hand that trail over, so that's one of the options.
Okay.
Probably the simplest option.
Gotcha. Thank you.
And is it only a north-south trail intersecting in that area? They're going through the area?
It comes from the south and will go to the east.
Yeah,
It's more of an east-west trail.
I believe I have a slide that shows the trail.
Yep, so, yep, that's what I thought. What about, does it cross 30 and 116?
It crosses 30, but not on this property.
Mhm.
It crosses 30 when the Cavarati property develops. That's where that connection, I think, would happen.
So then we will expect a tunnel underneath 30 at that point?
I would have to pull up the plan if a grade separated crossing is noted there. I believe most likely, yes, considering how busy County Road 30 it is. But yeah, the grade separated crossing was something called out as part of the
Just
Three Rivers plan.
yeah. We
Could be
should
a
have it
bridge.
in both places or
It would be
neither place.
It would be a goal to
Okay.
have some sort of improved crossing, and grade separated is improved.
Okay, thank you.
Sorry. The applicant proposes screening of the drive-through lanes that are abutting a right-of-way in exchange for the flexibility to allow it. The flexibility in applying the required landscaping across the site rather than on a per lot basis will allow for more buffering near the edges of the site. And the flexibility to bypass the parking island, parking bay requirement, and specifically just where, like the spacing requirement, not the number of parking islands or the size of the parking islands, and specifically only in the commercial parking lot, will allow for more unified pedestrian walkways throughout that parking lot. Next slide. Planning Commission, the only change they made was a recommendation, a negotiation with the applicant, which would add a landscaping standard that any significant tree species, and basswoods was specifically called out in that discussion, removed from the site, be replaced with a similar species. So I took the time to go through the tree removal list from the applicant and then found comparable species that are in our preferred tree list for the Northeast District. So should this condition stay as recommended, basically every elm they remove needs to be replaced with the comparable species in this table, and so on and so forth. Next slide.
And is that included as a condition in the draft?
Yes, it's in the draft resolution for the PUD plan. Another visual, just kind of giving you an aerial view of the site plan.
Is it always the case that a tree has to be replaced by the same species?
No.
No.
No, that was a negotiation with Commissioner Brumman, who's the one that opposed the idea, and the applicant was very, what is the word I'm using?
Proposed the idea of...
Yeah, thank you.
Propose the idea of what?
Basically having the ecosystem that's being removed replaced with a similar ecosystem, so.
So that is part of the new application, is that they would follow through on that specific recommendation for replacing like for like.
Yeah, like for similar, just because some of the species we might not want, like some of the ash that they may have might be more susceptible to emerald, but we did find ash that are on our preferred tree list that are more resistant to the emerald ash borer. So, so it might not be the same, but similar species.
Okay. I want to maybe tee that up to have a conversation as to whether we impose that specific ratio of 1-to-1 on any applicant.
Okay.
Because who knows, you know, there might be who knows why those trees ended up there in the first place.
Gotcha.
Humans planted them. spots are. And so it's not as if this ecosystem has been in existence for 3,000 years and having a cedar tree instead of an elm tree, it might impact it, but we don't know the history of the entire ecosystem.
Yeah, if you want to make a note of that, then when we get into
Yeah.
discussion, we'll bring that up.
All right, next slide. And then the final component is the preliminary plat. Once we sort out the preliminary PUD plan, the plat is very easy to approve. It contains 43 lots and 1 outlot. But the outlot A between the villas would need to be absorbed, so that is by one of the villa lots. It doesn't really have a purpose and it's undevelopable, which we don't allow for in our code. And so approval of conditions noted in the staff report may result in changes to the lot layout, so that's just noted that there may, the ultimate unit account may be affected when we have our final PUDs come in. But it wouldn't, nothing higher would be able to be proposed without some change. It would be likely lower. Conditions of approval include compliance with what is approved, the preliminary PUD plan and our engineering memo and requirements such as that. So, next slide. All right, the Diamond Lake Regional Trail. So on this plan, it's the blue line. It's on the south side of the building, or south side of the site. So 116 is right there. That's where the underpass, and then it meanders southwest and would cross the new County Road 30 access and would go on to the Cothrati property at the time where that connection happens. That could be very well into the future. And then, as noted, it would eventually cross County Road 30 to the south. And so Three Rivers has identified, I'm sorry, a need for 55-foot wide easement, not 50, for the underpass portion of the trail, where the city typically takes a 20-foot wide trail easement. There is ongoing discussion as to whether the Diamond Lake Regional Trail should be located along the north or south side of Oswald Farm Road. The city engineering memo states that a crossing at the bend of Oswald Farm Road, as desired by the Parks and Trails Commission, so further, actually up further. Yeah, if we were to cross right where the underpass comes out, it does not comply with our crosswalk policy because it's mid-block crossing as well as at a bend. So the crosswalk policy really supports the location of this trail on the south side of Oswald Farm. However, if the city council does want to see it cross to the church side because there's less driveway conflicts, then we recommend it move a bit south to kind of line up with that entrance at the church because that at least it's still mid-block, but at least it's not at the bend of the road. So we do need the council to provide us with their preference to take that back with Three Rivers and finalize that location.
Do you want us to do that now? Or
Yeah, I
wait?
think maybe we should because
The graphic
I don't
is
wanna get
up.
lost
Don't
in
want
the
to
shuffle.
forget it.
Yeah.
So I'll speak from my time at Parks and Trails as we discussed it. So the challenge on the south side is you're crossing the inlet coming from 30. You're crossing 3 or 4 different driveway accesses that'll have either residential or commercial traffic. And so there's a lot of issues on trails with having to identify and move past stopped cars that may or may not be blocking intersections. So we felt it would be preferred to move to the north side and cross the road once, possibly with a higher level of control, like with the flashing beacons and the narrowing of the road with the curb extensions, versus trying to do it 4 separate times on the south side. So that was the primary motivation for that recommendation.
Okay.
So is it recommended that mid-block where that driveway comes out right there? Right about where our cursor is?
I would say just south of that driveway, probably, somewhere basically between those 2 curves, mid-block. We
Yeah.
identify the midpoint or somewhere close to that, likely just past the driveway.
Makes sense.
And that would be the engineering second recommendation, so that is the default compromise crossing.
What's your
between
first
the parts.
recommendation?
What's that?
First recommendation is stay
Is
on
the
the
blue
south.
line on the south side,
Okay.
consistent with our crossing.
Yeah.
And that's based on ultimate scenarios, but the the compromise recommended solution would be a mid-block crossing with curb extensions. And I believe their plan, if I was told correctly today, does propose RRFBs or something similar.
I don't know that we've developed that.
Okay. And that would be part, if you did a mid-block crossing, that would likely trigger that requirement, and either one probably would trigger it. So I guess that is the proposed compromise engineering recommendation.
I believe Three Rivers is open. The email, most recent email I've gotten from Three Rivers is they are also in support of the compromise approach. Should the city decide they want to see it on the north side of Oswald, they did not having it cross right where the separated crossing comes out is not ideal for them either. So.
And I think some of that's just looking to the future, because at some point, if it's on the north side, it will have to also cross the road again. So it's kind of a horse apiece, but it's really your discretion.
Dean, did you have something?
Just public safety for Matt. Past experiences, we start building tunnels for walkways and stuff. That's, in my past experiences, that attracts graffiti, those kind of things. Is there a concern on the public safety side of that? And then the second one was the height of the building's concern. I know it's vetted through at the fire department and stuff. Ladder trucks can reach 50 foot, all that stuff. From just the public safety side, I wanted to have that conversation.
Yeah, so the first one with the tunnel, obviously there's a lot to be learned from other sites and other cities where that's in there. I also know that, you know, things icing over underneath there, and you know, so there's probably some conversations with engineering, but also, you know, we're weighing pedestrian safety. I mean, we also know the 116. So
I'm all for the pedestrian safety. I just,
yep. And I don't know
so that we know that it's not optimal, but it is make it safe for people during the day. So
right. So we haven't developed a city policy on what, you know, what the specific requirements are, but I think that warrants some conversation certainly. And then as it relates to building height, as Natalie talked about earlier, we talked pretty extensively with our fire departments and our public safety planning, with access for all of those buildings and how that's achieved either through parking lots and with their equipment, how does the equipment access it? So we require the turning radius, we require the demonstrations. There was conversations about how that underground parking impacts the ability for the trucks. But also, by nature of design, access to some of these buildings on certain sides is going to be off of county roads. And so the feedback from the fire chiefs in those scenarios was
the setbacks from whatever down to 50 feet
having the
are going
smaller
to help
setbacks
that.
and making sure that there's clustering, because, you know, the hope would be is that our firefighters can safely access those without having to go through trees.
That's a pretty good pun, Matt.
Hey.
I
But
caught
also
it. I caught it too.
They wouldn't be, you know, fighting a fire from a tunnel of burning trees. So getting that clustering, getting that access is something that was looked at pretty extensively.
And the local ladder trucks are maximum length ladder trucks and such, so that limits the height, but doesn't restrict the height to less than whatever. So I appreciate that. And that was in the report. I just wanted to get it out there too. All things we think about, folks. So
These would be sprinkled, correct?
they would be sprinkled. Oh, yeah.
So Councilman Verkamp, I'm coming from a community where we had several of these underpasses, and I would say that proximity to population had a lot to do with how much graffiti we had. And so the fact that this one is actually going to have significant traffic around it is advantageous to us to inhibit those who would do graffiti. We experienced a lot of graffiti in those that were far away from population bases because no eyes on it. So then we had to put cameras out there in order to keep eyes on it.
Well
this
lit,
is going to have a lot of eyes on it.
Well lit, all these things are part of it, and I want it safe and kept nice. So all things I'm thinking about. Thank you, Jay, for weighing in and stuff that I forgot all about. You may have had previous experiences too, but another good decision made. Thank you very much for talking about it.
so the staff and planning commission ultimately recommend approval of the several components that need to be approved. Just to clarify, the planning commission approved the comprehensive plan amendment 4-0. The rest of these items were recommended for approval on a 3-1 vote. So what you would have to first approve is the comprehensive plan amendment, and then from there would be a ordinance change to rezone the property to a PUD. That does require a 4/5 majority of the seated council tonight for approval. And then should that be approved, a summary of ordinance for publication would be next, and that is a 4/5 majority vote as well. And then from there, we can approve the findings of fact for the rezoning, the preliminary PUD development plan, and the preliminary plat. If the council votes to deny the application, findings of fact should be provided to staff to support the denial, and then staff will prepare denial resolutions for the March 14th meeting. That's what I have for you. And the applicant does have his own presentation. He said he's going to keep it nice and quick for you.
Very brief.
Go right ahead.
Good evening, Mayor and City Council. My presentation will be much briefer than what I intended because Natalie virtually covered it all. There was one other additional historical aspect I wanted to just draw to your attention, and that's when we originally purchased the property from the Oswalds in 2000. It was a 76-acre parcel, and we sold 14 acres of the original 76 to Jim Uzell, who built the 6 homes on Hunter's Ridge, as well as the 2-acre area further road. So we retained 62 acres, and that ended up being the configuration you have. A couple years after that, we did sell 2 more acres of what is the current designated row homes site to Tom Lithgow, and we granted him easement for a driveway to that property at the time, and that easement obviously goes forward to the new owners of that property. He sold, I think, a year or 2 ago to the new property owner. But I think it goes without saying that we're very excited about this proposal. We have been waiting almost 20 years, a little over 20 years, to be able to initiate this event and so forth. Obviously, sewer and water was the deciding factor in us being able to do this. The crash of 2007 derailed everything in terms of development by about a decade, but we find ourselves now recovered from that, and we're excited to be a part of creating something that gives the city flexibility, because of more increased density on this site will allow the city council more flexibility in doing some density or less density in other areas. So with that, I'd like to turn it over to Josh, and he has some additional comments.
I promise you I will keep it brief. In fact, I might even skip some slides. So we've talked a little about the timeline quite a bit. So people were talking about this 2001 plan. So I just wanted to give everybody a chance to take a look at this. If you go to the next plan, there's another version of it, pretty similar in terms of, from 2001 to 2006. But I think what's interesting is if you go to the next slide, there's our site, which we've seen and you guys have looked at, and I'll go into more detail in a second. The next slide is when we start to actually put these slides next to one another, how similar the overarching goals are, and how we've tried to take a lot of the kind of the core tenets of the 2001 plan and brought them into the 2023 plan, or 2024 as it were. So things like a view corridor from the 30 and 116 intersection all the way to the church. Things like, pretty similar amounts of medical office as to what we're proposing, a senior living use, a townhome use in a virtually similar location. And then, I would say the biggest change, or the biggest driver of change here is, hey, it was showing all this street connection to future development was really occurring on Hunter's Ridge. And the difference between 2001 and 2023 is, at the time when we were developing this, is, master plans for utilities have changed. There's a whole bunch of other things that ultimately are trying to push, utilities along Hope Way. which also kind of makes sense for us to take traffic off of Hunter's Ridge and minimize the impact to those folks as best as we can. So, and then finally, kind of to build on some of the other things that we're talking about is, you know, these connection points were identified back in 2001, as well as that trail connection is what we're talking about tonight. So it's just was, when Brian showed me this, it was interesting that the things that have changed, obviously a lot more stormwater being treated on our plans at this point because of the regulations that have changed pretty drastically, as well as you know, just an overall intensity of housing use, just as there's a need, and certainly the guidance has changed since, I guess it hasn't really changed since 2001, but this is more of an execution of that guidance. So next. I'll go through this really quickly because I think you've literally seen this exact slide. Our goal was to really utilize the existing tree buffers as best we possibly can. Next slide. And then where we couldn't, where we might be taking some trees away to really plant the understory. So the overstory will still be in place with adjacent trees or even trees that we're able to maintain. But to enhance the understory with, you know, tree levels that would block views now, but also in the future, as well as some additional shrubbery. You asked about these enhanced landscape areas. I think it's important to recognize that, yes, we have 50-foot buffer. That 50 feet is actually taken, and the 60 feet was the code, or kind of where that was coming from. We're actually 60 feet from the existing right-of-way line. We have to dedicate 10 feet to Henry County on both 30 and 116 with this plat. So we are 60 feet from the current line, 50 feet from the new dedicated line. So that's where that bit of flexibility, or that ask, is there. But the idea being really to try to add some nice landscaping areas against these multifamily buildings where we can, and then requesting some flexibility in the commercial areas for landscaping, simply because those two needs are drastically different. Commercials wanting to see kind of into the commercial space to allow visibility to signage and so on and so forth. But we still feel like we can provide a landscape package that features the buildings and doesn't, you know, seem very stark in those spaces. Next slide, please. This has changed slightly. This is obviously the Diamond Link Trail for us. If the council deems it appropriate to move the trail to the north side, that's just fine. Brian is gracious enough to basically say, hey, and could provide an easement on the church land. That's not a problem. It's really up to the council in that location. But was just showing some other locations of pathways throughout the site. Next. This is kind of that section, like Councilman Bottom, that's showing kind of where this is cut through. To your point, these trees are shown over here. It's always a challenge if we go to the next slide. When we're producing something like this graphic, if I were to go and say that these trees, day one, are going to be as tall as this building, that's disingenuous on the one side as well. So I want it to be somewhat honest in terms of like what a middle ground looks like, say, 10 years in the future. The goal here, and I think the idea of this graphic was to say, hey, I think 4 stories seems like a very tall structure in the middle of this site at this point, but in context to other items on the site, it's lower than what's currently there. And if we go to the next slide, I took the liberty of kind of comparing what we're proposing, which is a 4-story flat roof product, to what a 3-story pitched roof product would look like in terms of height, as well as some other projects that this council has approved, and also those items from the Hope site itself. So just kind of providing a little bit of, or a couple of data points in terms of what we're actually asking for. You note that on my section I was showing 50 feet, whereas these 11-foot 2-inch floor-to-floors would result in a 44-foot 8-foot tall building. Really the flexibility I'm asking for there is if we want to do some unique things with parapets, or we had some mechanical equipment that exceeded that height. It's just enough flexibility where we're not coming at asking for a PUD amendment for another foot because we have an air conditioner that needs it, that kind of thing. So this is just that quick slide. Next slide, please. One of the things that was brought up, and it's not uncommon when we do multifamily developments, it's just like, the type of person that lives in multifamily. I think it's there's some perceptions out there that are unfortunate relative to the type of person that rents an apartment, and I think that that's changed pretty drastically. So I just wanted to give you approximate market rate rents that we're seeing for these type of units right now, as well as just like the type of person that lives in these buildings, whether it's a young professional that wants to work close to, be able to walk to work across the street at the nursing home, or hey, she's paying off her student loans, she just needs a spot to sit so that she can maybe evaluate potentially a single-family home purchase in the city of Corcoran at a later date. So I think, I don't want to dwell too much on that because, I feel like maybe the council understands that multifamily